I don't want to be a burden to my children, a controversial decision. One day, I sat at the kitchen table, looking out the window, and suddenly realized something. I don't want to live anymore. My name is David, and I'm 74 years old. I've spent my life working hard, raising 3 grown children, and now I live alone in my old house. My wife passed away 5 years ago, and since then, I've felt something missing in my life. Everything seems so quiet and empty. At first, I felt okay living alone. There was no one to worry about or complain. But over time, loneliness crept into every corner of my soul. And then I started to feel an uncomfortable truth I couldn't avoid. How can I keep going when my health is deteriorating? One of the biggest decisions I've made is that I don't want to be a burden to my children. My 3 kids have their own families, and they have their own lives. I know none of them can bear the responsibility of caring for me in my later years. Last autumn, when my son, Ryan, came to visit, he asked me a question I couldn't answer immediately. "Dad, do you think it's time for us to look into putting you in a nursing home?" I knew it was a hard question. My son wants me to get the best care, but I also know that my being dependent on them would make their lives harder. I don't want to be a burden to them. I looked into Ryan's eyes, tried to smile, and said, "I'll be fine, son. I can take care of myself." But the truth is, I wasn't sure. I began to feel the signs of aging. My legs no longer moved as quickly. My memory wasn't as sharp as before. There were nights when I woke up in pain and no one was there to comfort me. And sometimes I sat by the window watching families stroll by and wondered how much longer I could go on. Truthfully, I've thought a lot about my decision. Living alone might bring me freedom, but it also brings loneliness and uncertainty. Yet, I still didn't want to be a burden to my children. They all have busy lives, jobs, and families of their own. I didn't want to make them feel responsible for me. Once, I talked to an old friend of mine, Bob, who had lived alone for over 10 years. I asked him if he regretted not accepting his children's help. Bob looked at me and said, "David, no one wants to be a burden on their children. But sometimes, we need to understand that sometimes our children want to share their lives with us. We also need to accept that there comes a point when we can't take care of ourselves anymore." His words made me think. Have I been too proud to accept help? Have I been closing the door to opportunities for my children to care for me in my final years? I decided to try to think differently. I couldn't keep clinging to my pride. If my children truly love me, they wouldn't see me as a burden. They'd see me as part of their lives, even when I'm old and weak. What I need is not to live in isolation, but to share memories, to laugh with my children, and not feel like I'm just a responsibility. But I also understand that everyone has a different perspective on taking care of the elderly. That's why my final decision was to find a balance, not to depend entirely on my children, but not to live alone and in fear of a future with no one by my side. I haven't made up my mind yet, but I know I need to open up more. Sometimes, accepting help doesn't mean weakness. It can be a step toward preserving respect, love, and connection between parents and children. Headphone, thank you for listening to episode 3 of the Autumn Stories of Life series. If this story moved you, please share it with someone close to you. Leave a comment. What do you think about living independently versus depending on children in old age? Are we doing our children harm by insisting on living alone? See you in the next episode.